I swirl the last sip of my oat milk latte, watching the steam fade against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my corner office. The Chicago skyline looks almost smug this morning, like it knows the secret I'm about to reveal. The room smells faintly of fresh peonies and the faint citrus perfume I spritzed on my wrist before the board meeting. My silk blouse feels cool against my skin, perfectly pressed, a quiet reminder of how far I've come from the girl who once had to borrow suits from thrift stores for interviews.
My phone buzzes on the desk.
The name flashing on the screen makes me pause. I almost laugh.
Of course it's them.
I let it ring twice before I answer, my voice calm and even. Hello. It's Michael, the man who sat across from me 5 years ago and told me my idea was too ambitious for someone like me. He clears his throat before speaking, and I can practically hear the pride sliding down his throat. Emily, he says, we'd like to discuss a potential partnership. We heard what you've done. I glance at the market reports spread across my desk, the numbers all but screaming my victory. Partnership? Interesting choice of words. My reflection in the window stares back at me, composed, confident, a small, knowing smile tugging at my lips. I'll have my assistant set up a meeting, I say smoothly, my pulse steady. As I hang up, I can't help but think. This isn't just a meeting. It's the moment I've been waiting for, the day I walk back into the room they once shut me out of. 5 years ago, I wasn't sitting in a corner office. I was standing in a cramped conference room, clutching a USB drive so tightly my knuckles had gone white. I had spent weeks preparing for that presentation, 3 solid nights without sleep, perfecting every slide, every number. I wore my only decent blazer, the one my best friend Sarah had loaned me, a size too big but good enough to look professional. When I walked in, Michael barely glanced up from his phone. 2 other partners sat across the table, both older men, their suits expensive, their expressions skeptical before I even spoke. I remember my voice shaking just a little as I started. I walked them through the market research, the opportunity, the projections. My idea wasn't just good, it was solid, innovative, scalable. I had done everything right. But when I finished, there was silence. A long, heavy pause. Then Michael leaned back, arms crossed. Emily, he said with a faint smile that wasn't really a smile, this is too ambitious. But we don't think you're the right person to execute this. Maybe if a larger firm took it over. The words hit me like a slap. Not the right person? I had built this idea from scratch. One of the other men chuckled softly. It's a cute concept. Maybe try something smaller, more in your lane. I felt my throat tighten, heat rising behind my eyes. I forced a polite nod, gathered my things, and left before they could see the tears burning in my eyes. In the hallway, my phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. She had sent me a photo of a handwritten note she kept taped above her kitchen sink. If they don't open the door, build your own. I wiped my face, stared at that note for a long moment, and something shifted inside me. By the time I stepped out into the cold Chicago air, my humiliation had hardened into determination. They might not believe in me, but I wasn't about to hand them my dream. That night, sitting on my apartment floor with takeout noodles and my laptop, I registered my own company name. My hands were still shaking, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from resolve. The first year nearly broke me. I worked out of my tiny apartment, my kitchen table buried under papers, sticky notes covering the walls like a crime investigation scene. Some nights, I'd pass out on the couch with my laptop still open, spreadsheets blurring into dreams. I burned through my savings faster than I expected. There were days when I had to choose between buying groceries and paying for software subscriptions. My landlord threatened to raise the rent, and my car broke down twice that winter. But every morning, I would wake up, tie my hair back, and remind myself of that note from my grandmother. The turning point came when I attended a free networking event downtown. I almost didn't go. I was exhausted, broke, and my coat had a missing button, but something told me to show up anyway. That night, I met Margaret. She was a seasoned entrepreneur with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a warmth that disarmed me instantly. She listened to my pitch without interrupting, then leaned forward with a knowing smile. "You've got something real here," she said. But you need strategy, not just grit. She became my first mentor, teaching me how to negotiate contracts, find investors who respected my vision, and, most importantly, how to trust my own instincts. With her guidance, I landed my first big client, a mid-sized retailer willing to take a chance on my platform. I still remember the moment they signed the contract. I locked myself in the bathroom afterward and cried silently, mascara streaking my cheeks, because for the first time, it felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. I hustled harder. Nights bled into mornings. My hands ached from typing, my eyes stung from staring at screens, but every milestone fueled me. The first profitable quarter, the first time I paid myself a real salary, the first employee I hired. I didn't broadcast my success. When my family asked how things were going, I'd shrug and say, "It's coming along." On social media, I posted nothing but sunsets, coffee cups, and random quotes. What they didn't know was that within 3 years, I had built a company that was eating up the market share of the very firms that once dismissed me. By year 4, I had investors seeking me out, competitors whispering my name in meetings. And when I finally signed the deal that gave me controlling interest over the largest distributor in the region, the same one Michael once worked with, I didn't tell a soul. I didn't need applause. Because the win was never about proving them wrong in public. It was about proving to myself that I was always the right person for the job. 3 days later, I stood in my office, watching the elevator numbers climb on the panel across the hall. My assistant had set the meeting exactly as I asked. Early morning, when the city was still stretching awake, when the light would hit my office just right. The door opened with a soft chime. Michael stepped out first, followed by the same 2 partners who once laughed me out of that conference room. Their suits looked as sharp as ever, but I could see it, the hesitation in their steps, the careful glances around my office as they entered. I gestured toward the seating area, a soft leather sofa positioned beneath an abstract painting I had bought after closing my first $1 million deal. Sunlight spilled across the glass coffee table, glinting off the awards and framed articles on the wall. "This is impressive," one of them said, his voice almost reluctant. I smiled politely. "Thank you. Please have a seat." They sat, their movements stiff. I remained standing for a moment, letting them take it all in. The floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with market research books, the neatly framed quote from my grandmother's note hanging above my desk. "If they don't open the door, build your own." Finally, I sat across from them, crossing one leg over the other, my posture calm, controlled. Michael cleared his throat. "Emily, first of all, congratulations on what you've built. We've been following your progress, and it's remarkable." There was a time when that compliment would have sent my heart racing. Now it felt almost like background noise. He continued, "We're interested in exploring a partnership. With your reach in the Midwest market and our network." I raised a hand, stopping him gently but firmly. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "I don't think you understand. I already own 70% of the Midwest market. And last week, I finalized the acquisition of Northern Distribution, which means I control the supply chain you rely on." The words hung in the air like a lightning strike. One of the partners blinked. You bought Northern?" "Yes," I said simply. "So, technically, you're not here to offer me a partnership. You're here because you have no choice but to work with me if you want to stay competitive." Their silence was deafening. Michael's jaw tightened. For a moment, I saw a flash of the same man who once dismissed me. But then it was gone, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe. Or fear. I leaned back, letting the moment stretch. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city below. "You told me once that I wasn't the right person to execute this idea," I said softly. "You told me to stay in my lane. Well, I built my own lane. And now I own the road." Their faces shifted, shock, disbelief, a touch of shame. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the truth settle over them like dust in sunlight. "Now," I said finally, sliding a folder across the table toward Michael, "here are my terms. If you want access to my network, you'll follow them. Otherwise," I let the sentence trail off with a shrug. I didn't need to finish it. They knew exactly what it meant. Michael picked up the folder slowly, as if it weighed more than paper should. He flipped it open, scanning the first page. The partners leaned in, their brows furrowing as they read. "These aren't just business terms," one of them said carefully. "They're personal terms," I replied. "If we're going to work together, it won't just be about profit. It'll be about rebuilding trust, starting with respect." I gestured toward the document. Clause 1. Diversity and equity in hiring. Not on paper, in practice. I want quarterly reports proving it. Clause 2. Mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs. You'll sponsor them, and I'll oversee the selection process. Clause 3. Ethical sourcing. No cutting corners, no underpaying suppliers. Michael's lips pressed into a thin line. That's a lot. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. It's what should have been done years ago. If you want to stay in the market, you'll adapt. Otherwise, you'll watch from the sidelines while I continue to take your share. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of my words filled the room. Then, slowly, one of the partners nodded. "It's fair," he admitted. "Tough, but fair." I saw Michael's jaw tighten, pride warring with practicality. Finally, he exhaled and nodded too. "We'll do it." A strange warmth spread through my chest. I wasn't here for revenge, not really. I was here to make sure that the door that had once been slammed in my face would stay open for others. "Good," I said, my tone softening. "Because this isn't just about me anymore. It's about every young woman with an idea who's told she's too ambitious, too inexperienced, too much. I refuse to let them go through what I did." Michael closed the folder and stood. "You've changed," he said quietly. I smiled faintly.
No.
I just finally became who I was always meant to be. There was no arrogance in my voice, no lingering bitterness, just calm certainty. The kind that comes from surviving the fire and walking out stronger. As they left, I watched them through the glass walls of my office. Their heads were slightly bowed, their steps slower than when they came in. The power dynamic had shifted permanently. And for the first time, I felt not just victorious, but free. The office was quiet after they left, the echo of their footsteps fading down the hallway. I walked back to my desk and let myself sink into the leather chair, breathing deeply. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the framed note above my desk, my grandmother's words, slightly faded now but more powerful than ever. "If they don't open the door, build your own." I reached up and touched the frame, feeling the smooth glass beneath my fingertips. That single piece of advice had carried me through late nights, tears, and moments where quitting felt like the only option. And now, here I was, not just at the table they once denied me, but at the head of it. Later that week, I visited my grandmother. She sat on her porch, wrapped in her favorite knit shawl, her gray hair glinting in the afternoon sun. I told her everything, the meeting, the terms, the look on their faces when they realized I owned the market. She smiled, her eyes crinkling with pride. "I always knew you would," she said softly. I felt something inside me loosen, a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Driving back to the city that night, I passed the old building where I'd been rejected all those years ago. The windows were dark, the sign faded, a relic of a place that once held my dreams hostage. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel bitterness. I just felt done. The girl who had walked out of that room with shaking hands was gone. In her place stood a woman who had carved out her own space, on her own terms. As I pulled into the garage of my high-rise and looked at the skyline glowing in the night, I smiled to myself. Not because I had beaten them, but because I had become exactly who I promised that girl I would be. When I stepped into my quiet apartment, I slipped off my heels, poured a glass of wine, and looked out over the city. They refused my offer. I whispered with a small, satisfied smile. Now I own the market, and for the first time in years, it felt like the world was exactly where it was supposed to be.